My lying wife had a multiple-year-long affair and the lawyer told me I would lose everything if I divorced her. So I spent years perfecting my payback. My revenge began by discovering my wife Carrie's infidelity after 14 years of marriage and 3 kids. I saw a text appear on her work phone for just a few seconds that would forever change my life. It was a message that was escapefully graphic and had no business being on anyone's work phone. It was on a lock screen and the sender's name, Perry, was visible. The world stopped around me. I just froze. My first thoughts were, what the hell was that about? It's her work phone. That kind of message gets people fired. Then it hit me. Was Carrie having an affair? It's amazing how the brain works. I suddenly started remembering a lot of things Carrie had done that seemed odd, but I'd either dismissed them myself or immediately accepted her explanation. She was always walking out of the room to answer a call or return a text and claimed that it would violate HIPAA. She was a nurse. If I overheard her talking about a patient, I accepted this because education has similar privacy laws regarding students. I'm a district school admin. She would sometimes come home with the faint smell of cologne on her clothes and claimed it was from helping to move male patients. Again, I accepted this at face value, but it always struck me as odd how it seemed to have the same scent of cologne. A lot of things that I'd missed before. Our love life in the bedroom had cooled off considerably, which wasn't helped by her having to leave the house at odd hours to fill in for other nurses that called in sick. I also recalled where I'd seen the name Perry before, and a call to the hospital confirmed he was a doctor there. For the next week or so, I was walking around in daze trying to put all of the pieces together. One of our kids had left a book in Carrie's car, so it was an excuse to visit the hospital. My kid went up to get Carrie's car key. I talked to a nurse in the lobby and joked about how work phones seem like a blessing, but all they do is put you on call 24 hours a day. This led to her eventually telling me that the hospital was too cheap to give cell phones to nurses, so only high-level executives got them, which didn't include Carrie. With pretty much everything confirmed, I was able to get a call from Carrie. I took some personal time off the next day to talk to a divorce lawyer. The news she gave me was horrible. We lived in a community property state with no-fault divorce. I made more money than Carrie, she'd been the primary caretaker of the kids, and we'd been married for more than 10 years. Basically, if I filed for divorce, I'd be screwed. Lose the house, pay alimony, she'd get a huge chunk of my retirement, and I'd pay child support for the next decade unless I was lucky enough to be awarded joint custody. The worst thing she told me was that it didn't matter that she cheated. It didn't matter. I was crushed. There was only one person I could trust with this kind of information. She was a fellow teacher that had also made the jump to administration, but was stuck at a school site. Let's call her Anne. And had been married at 19, but her marriage was annulled when her husband got some other woman pregnant. Since then, she'd focused on her career and we'd found we were kindred spirits in a lot of ways regarding K-12 education. I talked to Anne. She said something to me that changed my whole mindset. If you don't like the hand you're dealt, change the deck. I realized I had 2 problems. I made more money than Carrie and she had more time than me to be the primary caretaker of the kids. The second issue was actually kind of easy. At every district office, there are jobs that are fast tracks to higher positions and there are jobs that administrators suffer through. And again, I sat down with our district superintendent and asked about being transferred to that position. At first he was shocked, but I told him that it was my time to take one for the team and it would fill a hole in my admin experience. He agreed. It was really just crunching numbers with no personal or student interaction, so I could set my schedule, even take a laptop home and work there. With my new free time, I began taking the kids to school, picking them up from school, and taking them home. I'd help them with their homework, make dinner, etc. while the end goal was to become their primary caretaker. I can't explain how much I really enjoyed taking a more active role in their day-to-day lives. My salary hadn't been reduced, so I needed to find a way for Carrie to make a lot more money than she was in current nursing position. I remembered Carrie being mad that her supervisor told her in the future, bachelor degrees will be worthless and everyone will need at least a master's degree. Carrie had worked hard to get her bachelor's and that supervisor's comment peed all over her hard work. I talked her into starting a master's program. I told her that since I had a much more flexible work schedule, I would keep taking care of the kids. She was reluctant at first, then I said, you could have every evening free to study or go to class, whatever you want to do. I saw her eyes immediately, probably thinking that she could spend more time with Perry. To make sure she was actually completing her master's courses, I paid her tuition and fees directly to her university. It was going to take her between 2 and 3 years to finish. Those years were rough at times. I could tell every time she was rushing off or coming back from seeing Perry. There was an excitement or sense of satisfaction in her eyes that just wasn't there when she was doing her coursework. I had to either smile or pretend I didn't notice. My temper got short at times and I found myself in arguments over petty things. Nonsense. A couple of times I almost blew the whole charade, having to bite my tongue and apologize rather than scream insults at her that she deserved. Anne remained my confidant through all of this. I'd recommended her for my previous fast-track position and she joined me at the district office. Anne was qualified, hard-working, ambitious and only needed her foot in the door to impress the higher-ups. I even got a few pats on the back for recommending her after she impressed everyone. Anne and I started our own affair. It wasn't some hot-blooded, passionate romance, but 2 friends giving each other what they need. Without Anne, I wouldn't have been able to maintain the charade of being the oblivious cuckold. But when Carrie would come home smiling after spending time with Perry, I was able to bear it, smiling back because I had my own lover. After 3.5 years, Carrie completed her master's and was promoted at her hospital. Her salary went up substantially and was now higher than mine. The kids and I made her a congratulations dinner. I made a joke about her being the breadwinner for the family and she laughed, joking back I should be a stay-at-home dad now. A month later, I went back to the lawyer and told her the financial situation had drastically changed. With these new facts, she drafted the petition and filed it. When the kids were with my mother, I had Carrie served. The deputy knocked on our front door and I let him in, pointing at my wife. He asked her name and then handed her a copy of the divorce petition. With the deputy standing there, I told Carrie I knew all about her affair with Perry. I told her to go be happy with her Dr. Lover. She screamed at me, tried to lie, and then made the mistake of rushing toward me. The deputy stopped her and warned her that women go to jail for domestic violence too. He suggested she pack a bag to stay somewhere else. Carrie left after I promised not to tell the kids about her affair. I didn't tell the kids. But I told my mother, who told my sister, who told her kids, who told their cousins, my kids. It took a few days, but eventually the kids knew that Dad was divorcing Mom because she had a boyfriend. In the end, the court granted the divorce, giving me primary custody of our kids, because I was already their primary caretaker. I kept the house with the promise I'd refinance to buy out Carrie's half. She was ordered to pay child support, and I used that fact to negotiate with her to give up any rights to my retirement if I bought her out. I was able to refinance my home and with a little money borrowed from my parents, I bought our Carrie's community property interest in the home and in my retirement. The day she signed all the paperwork with my lawyer finally ending any possible financial obligations to her was the happiest I'd been. I felt like I could finally breathe. I celebrated with and had been my rock through all of it. I cried many times in her arms and I would eventually marry. She got promoted to a higher position and I was convinced to take back my previous position at the district when my youngest child reached high school. Carrie and I got along well after the divorce. We took the kids to family therapy and worked out this co-parenting thing. For a few months, she took a beating from the kids about why she needed a boyfriend when Daddy was there all along. Between the kids and the therapist raking her over the coals, I didn't have to say anything at all. Carrie missed a lot of time with the kids because of her now legitimately busy work schedule and I actually felt bad that my kids were missing time with their mother, so encouraged them to talk to her on the phone instead. When Carrie found out that I'd proposed to Anne, she congratulated me. I told her it's okay for her to marry Perry too. She got sad. She told me that Perry had started seeing another woman, a younger nurse at the hospital. They did get together. She wasn't fun anymore. My ex-wife, the woman who cheated on me and destroyed our marriage, was looking to me for sympathy. I had none to give. What I had was years of anger and frustration. Years of knowing some other man was sleeping with my wife. I had lost weight from not being able to eat. I'd suffered hypertension and had to confide in my doctor why it wasn't the stress of my job. I had to listen to my dentist complain about how I was grinding and listening to him tell me I'd need dental implants if it kept up. There were times when I had to be intimate with Carrie to keep up the charade, only to lie that I wanted to use rubbers to remind us how we used to have intimacy when we were dating or because I might have a bladder infection, then go take a test anyway and wait for the results before seeing it again. But in the end, it was all worth it. My spoiled brother proposed to my fiancée in front of me in order to show me that she never wanted me. My brother Mark used to date my current fiancée Jen a few years ago. They were only together for a month before he broke things off with her because he was bored of being in a relationship and never really wanted to settle down anyway. At the time they were dating I was low contact with him so I had no idea he even had a girlfriend. The reason I was low contact with him is because he was somewhat of a golden child, who always got his way and was enabled by our parents. He hated the idea of me having something he does not have and would often go out of his way to one-up me on anything. Years of this, capped with him stealing my car without my mom protesting, confirmed I wanted to distance myself from him. Anyway, I had no idea who his ex-girlfriend Jen was until I met her. Jen and I met at a bar when I moved back home and hit it off really well. She was easily the most beautiful and intelligent woman I ever met and we met up a few times more before we made it official. Fast forward to this December and I finally bring her up to my family and ask them to meet her at Christmas. By this point I had began talking to Mark more frequently. They knew I was in a relationship but I kept details about her to a minimum until I knew how serious we really were. My parents asked to see pictures and they started passing my phone around the dinner table. Mark saw it and blew up, calling me a crappy brother for dating his ex-girlfriend and he demanded I break it off with her. I refused. When I asked Jen about it, she confirmed they dated and gave me the details about their breakup. It took a few weeks but eventually Mark stopped bringing up me dating his ex and I thought he was over it. On Jen's birthday this year, I took her out to a fancy dinner with both of our families and her closest friends and I asked her to marry me. Mark flipped once again and blew up about me proposing to her, which I and my sisters immediately shut down. The incident happened this past weekend. Mark had been pretty quiet about the whole thing for the last 2 months. I didn't see him much and figured he went low contact with me, which I had no problem with. Then he invited me and Jen for family dinner at his apartment with my parents and sisters. I thought it was weird but my parents and sisters were also going so we agreed to go. The dinner was nice, nothing too fancy, and we moved to the living room to talk. About 30 minutes into normal conversation, Mark stood up and told us he had an announcement. He made a long speech about being happy to have his family around for his big moment, then got on one knee and pulled out this cheap ring while asking Jen to marry him. Jen was confused and obviously uncomfortable and demanded that he put it away and stand up. My dad tried to make a grab for Mark, but I got to him first and socked him repeatedly. My dad pulled me off of him, and while my brother was on the floor, he said something along the lines of wanting to show me that Jen wasn't really into me and that I just wanted to get back at him. Get back at him for what I will never know. Before it could get worse, my parents rushed me out and promised to talk to him. It's been a few days since it happened and I'm still ticked off. After a few days after my brother Mark and I got into a fist fight, I called him and asked him to meet up with me at my place to talk. I told him I would prefer Jen to be around for the talk as well. He agreed to talk to both of us and showed up at my place around noon today. It was pretty quiet for a few minutes before I started the conversation. I apologized for not warning him I would be proposing to Jen, and I apologized for hitting him. Especially because I found out I had broken his nose and I actually offered to pay for the medical nose, which he refused. I then told him what Jen had said about the relationship and breakup when I asked her about it, and I asked him to confirm if it was true. I pretty much said that his reaction throughout his whole thing has been extreme and I wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding their relationship or downplaying how serious they were. He confirmed that they only dated for a few weeks and he broke up with her because he lost interest. Jen asked if he was acting like this because he still had feelings or regrets about ending things with her. He said he could admit he thought she was more attractive than when he last saw her, but there weren't any feelings or regrets. He said he just didn't like seeing a girl he dated, even if it was short-term. With his older brother and as a man I shouldn't have violated him by pursuing things with his ex. I reminded him that I had no idea they dated, so it wasn't like I consciously did this knowing their history together. He shrugged me off and said it didn't matter, I still should have broken it off. He was adamant that if the roles were reversed he would have done the same thing, which I doubt. I asked him why he proposed to her if he didn't have any lingering feelings. Basically, he said he was talking about it to one of his buddies who was around when Mark and Jen dated, and the guy put the idea in his head that maybe Jen knew from the start that we were related. His friend went on to say he was doing this to get back at him considering Jen had been hung up on him after they ended and Mark really bought into this. So he came up with the idea to propose and see if she dumped me for him. Jen asked him to elaborate on why he thought she was hung up on him, and he told her that he heard she was asking about him following the breakup and still hanging out at the places they used to go to, so it was a valid assumption. Then for her to pop up randomly with his brother affirmed his suspicions. Jen told him she'd only asked about him once following the breakup and she'd been hanging out at those places with friends before they started dating and she wouldn't avoid them because of a breakup. She also told him she was offended at the idea that she would go as low as to pursue me, just to get back at him. He shrugged and gave her a half-baked apology but said she had to see it from his point of view. He asked her if she really didn't know and she told him that she didn't see the resemblance in us until we were in the same room and we act nothing alike, so it never crossed her mind, and he said okay. That pretty much wrapped up the conversation. He did tell me before he left that I could take back his invite to the wedding because he can't bring himself to support our relationship knowing he used to date her. I told him he didn't have to worry about that as he was most likely going to be uninvited anyway. It's been a few hours since our talk and I do feel better. My parents aren't too happy about him being uninvited. Once again, I'm going to limit contact with Mark and I doubt he'll reach out to me anytime soon either. So I've been low contact with my brother Mark since our last conversation. I haven't called him and he hasn't called me, and our only interactions have been in family settings. As it stands, my mom is still extremely upset that Mark is still uninvited for my wedding. It started with a comment made during my younger sister Sophie's birthday. Her boyfriend of 4 years proposed to her at the end of the night and we sat around talking about what she envisioned for her dream wedding. She talked a bit about wanting a destination wedding and her ideas for the cake and dress. Then she said to me, "I know Mark's banned from your wedding but you won't care if he comes to mine, right?" I laughed it off and told her I can't get mad about her guest list even if I wanted to. My mom gave me this weird look and asked if Mark was still not invited to my wedding. I told her yes and she got irritated. She told me she thought I was joking and said I was being unreasonable to go through with banning him from the wedding since he's family. She accused me of holding a grudge just to be petty. I reminded her that he and I agreed on him not coming. I also told her she is once again taking his side like she has always done. Sophie laid into my mom a bit about trying to make her special day about Mark and my mom dropped the issue. A few days later, my mom stopped by my house and said she wanted to discuss my wedding. She asked me why I was so adamant about Mark not coming to my wedding. She said that I shouldn't be so insecure about Mark and Jen's previous relationship and that uninviting him was a step too far. She had the nerve to ask me if I'm scared that Jen is still in love with Mark. I laughed at that and told her that Mark and I mutually agreed on him not coming to the wedding and he can come to me about it himself if he has a problem with it. We got into an argument and she said that if I wasn't going to re-invite Mark then she would not be coming either because I'm ostracizing her son. I shrugged and told her if that's what she wants then she can toss her invite in the trash because I won't beg her to be there. She asked me if I would really be okay with her not attending and I told her it wouldn't be the first time she missed an event of mine because of Mark. She said I was being an a-hole for throwing her past mistakes in her face and she stormed out. I then started getting messages and phone calls from her and a few family members about the whole situation, saying I was in the wrong and urging me to invite Mark just to keep the peace. Jen's also been getting messages from my mom asking her to talk to me and get me to change my mind, but to my knowledge she hasn't been responding so far. Most of my mom's side of the family are standing in solidarity with her and not attending, while my dad and his side of the family, which is only my aunt and uncle and their 2 kids, agree with me and are still coming. My dad was usually the one who stood up for me too. Him and mom always fought in regards to her favoritism, which she always denied, of course. Also, I talked to Mark about it and asked him if he had a problem with not having an invite. He said he uninvited himself in the first place and he doesn't get why they're making a big deal because he still doesn't want to go. He told me to leave him out of the fighting because he's not involved, and he says he'd tell her the same. As of now, I'm back to being low contact with my mom, but my dad and I are still on decent terms. My mom is now officially uninvited from the wedding after abusing Jen. So about 2 weeks after she decided to not come to the wedding, she stopped by and said she wanted to clear the air and talk about everything. We agreed and invited her in to join us for dinner. Jen made her a plate of food and I asked her if she was still planning on not coming to the wedding. She said that while she wants to, she can't get over me not inviting my brother Mark because of a simple mistake. I reminded her that his simple mistake was proposing to my fiancée with me sitting less than 3 feet away from him. My mother claimed it was just a joke and I should learn a sense of humor. Jen asked her why she wanted to talk if she was maintaining the same stance on Mark coming to the wedding. She said she wanted to talk to Jen and she was hoping she would hear her out and talk me into inviting Mark again. She apparently assumed I was at work and she'd be able to catch her alone. Jen politely told her that she understood her thought process, but she wouldn't have had that conversation anyway without me present since this is about my brother. My mom made a comment somewhere in the lines of Jen being spineless and unable to have a conversation without me thinking for her. This started a pretty heated back and forth between the 3 of us, and Jen told her to get out. Jen got up and started walking towards the door and my mom followed her, still screaming at her. By this point she was yelling about her tearing our family apart. While Jen was unlocking the front door, my mom grabbed her hair and pulled her to the ground still screaming. She sucked her and tried to claw her and I physically dragged her off of her and pushed her outside while she fell flat on her butt. She banged on the door for a few minutes while I made sure Jen was okay before she left and called the both of us repeatedly. When I was sure Jen was okay, I texted my mom and told her not to bother reaching out again because we'll never speak to her again. I called my dad and sisters and told them what happened too. My dad was surprised and tried to make excuses, saying she'd been stressed about this whole situation for a while. My sisters say they knew she'd snap eventually since she's always been a crazy bitch, and they said they'd come make sure Jen is okay. I asked Jen if she wanted to press charges, but she declined and said she only wanted to cut contact with her for good. I told that part was obvious, but she should still talk to the police since she was physically assaulted, but she doesn't want my mom to get arrested. My sisters and Jen's mom came by to comfort her thankfully, so she's doing okay. My mom is blocked on everything until Jen says otherwise. Not knowing it was my mom, Jen answered and was greeted with my mom lunging at her and proceeding to hurt her really badly. Thankfully, Jen was able to get her off of her and push her outside, but some serious damage has been inflicted to Jen. We are definitely pressing charges. So Mark was my mom's golden child. Here's a full story as to why we never got along. Mark was my mom's baby boy and she didn't do much to try and hide it. My parents didn't spend much time with my sisters and I like normal parents did with their kids unless they had to, but they'd spend time with Mark as often as possible, like taking him out shopping while we stayed with a sitter, or bringing him home his favorite food and toys from the store when they'd shop alone. He usually got better things compared to the rest of us, like new expensive clothes while ours were thrifted, or new toys just for him compared to old toys we had to share with each other. If my sisters and I got gifts, they were for us to share, but my mom made it pretty clear that Mark's things were only for him and we shouldn't touch it. When Mark would screw up, I'd get punished for not being a good role model and showing him the proper way to behave. For example, Mark went through a phase of breaking his toys and my mom laid hands on me until I was hospitalized because obviously he learned the behavior from me, even though he never did. When he was 8, Mark got in trouble at school for trying to push a kid down the stairs. I was grounded for 2 weeks and told to apologize to the kid for not teaching my brother right. When I turned 13, I pushed for my parents to start giving me an allowance. They agreed as long as I did household chores like mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, raking leaves, etc. It was usually somewhere around $25 a week to help me start saving. Mark saw that I was getting money and he begged my parents for an allowance too. Instead of making him work, $10 of my allowance money was given to him each week because we were doing such a good job with our chores that he never touched. Whenever I asked him to help, he'd tell me it's not his job to do chores. So why should he bother? It was around this time that I started really distancing myself from my brother. By the time I entered high school, we only talked to each other when we needed small favors or when we absolutely had to. I got my first job when I turned 17 because I wanted to finally get my own car and make money that they couldn't force me to give to Mark. My oldest sister Maggie helped me start my own bank account and showed me how to properly budget and save my money. I got my first car at 18 after all of my hard work. When Mark got his license, my parents asked me to let him use my car to get around and for extra practice behind the wheel. Reluctantly I agreed, and for a while the arrangement was fine. Mark used my car when I didn't need it and helped maintain it pretty well. When he expressed wanting my parents to buy him his own car, my mom came to me and told me to give him my car because he needed it more. When I refused, she threatened to kick me out. We got in a fight that night which ended with her giving Mark my car and taking me to transfer ownership of it to him within the following few days. Since I didn't have anywhere else I could go at the time, I just sucked it up and signed it over. When I graduated high school, both of my parents skipped my graduation because Mark didn't want to sit in a long ceremony just to see me get a piece of paper, and my mom didn't want to leave him alone for the night. So I only had the support of my sisters and my aunt and uncle who wanted to take me out. They ended up having to bring me home at my parents' request because they made me dinner to make it up to me. It was a dinner I couldn't eat because my mom put shrimp and chicken on the same serving dish and I'm allergic to shellfish. But Mark loved shrimp so they made it with shrimp. In my first year out of high school I worked 2 jobs to buy myself another car, and at the start of the new school year I moved away for college and cut contact with them. My mom tried to reach out for the first few months via social media, and Sophie guilt-tripped Sophie into trying to contact me too. But I never responded and I told Sophie she would be cut off too if she kept trying. When she couldn't get to me through Sophie, she tried going through my older sister Charlotte, and a few times through Maggie and Mark until I threatened to file a restraining order for harassment. It was a bluff because I had no idea how to do it, but it managed to scare her off and the most I got from her was happy holiday texts over the years. Around the time I moved back, Charlotte told me they had been seeing a family therapist and my parents wanted to apologize for their treatment of us. I was hesitant but I agreed as long as they would be genuine, and the reconciliation process started when I moved back home. I will update you all with the rest when the full story comes out. Subscribe so you don't miss it.